Welcome back to another episode of networking. In this activity, we're going to talk about static route. Given the topology that we have, we'll have a network address of 10.136.0.0/13. And to attain all the network addresses for the LANs and the VLANs, we need to go through a VLSM or the variable length subnet mask. Since we need 500 hosts, the bigger, our next subnet mask would be the 10.136.0.0/23. And then the next one for the 100 hosts, 10.136.2.0/25. And for the 50 hosts, we have a network address of 10.136.2.128/26. And for the next, we have the VLANs. Having the 20 hosts, we have VLAN 4 and VLAN 17. For the VLAN 4, we have 10.136.2.192/27. And then VLAN 17, we have 10.136.2.224/27, since they both have 20 hosts. And then for the VLAN 2, 6, and 7, we have 10 hosts. Therefore, for the VLAN 7, we have 10.136.3.0/28. And for VLAN 6, we have 10.136.3.16/28 also. And lastly, for the VLAN 7, we have 10.136.3.32/28. And for the routers, they will have 2 hosts for each. So now, let us proceed to the configuring of our routers. First, in the LAN 1, we issue the enable command and then the configure terminal. And then we change the host name from router to R1 for us to avoid confusions. And we go to the interface G000 since it is the port connected to the router. Then we assign the IP address connected to it. Since you have 10.136.0.0, then our first usable host would be 0.1 and its subnet mask of /23. Then after that, we're gonna create an DHCP pool for the first LAN. We issue the command network and its network address 10.136.0.0 and its subnet mask. And then its default router, which is the first usable 10.136.0.1, and then we issue the command no shutdown. And then on the switch 8, we're gonna issue switch port mode trunk on the F01 since it is the port connected to the switch. in order to enable trunk port. And as we can see, as we go through IP configuration and click the DHCP, we're gonna generate a IP address, and it was successful. Now on the second LAN, we do the same configuration as we did on the first router or the first LAN. Go to enable and then configure terminal, and then we change the host name to avoid further confusion. And we go to the port connected to it for the LAN 2 having the 100 hosts, and we issue the IP address, which is 10.136.2.1, the first usable host, and then its subnet mask. And then after that, we issue again the IP DHCP pool for easier access to IP addresses. And we also do the same for the Ireland 3, which is the 10.136.2.120/26 having the 50 hosts. After configuring our router, we go to switches and then configure it by allowing the trunk port. After changing the host name, we'll go to the port connected to the switch and then allow the mode trunk. And we do the same for the switch 6 enable, and then configure terminal, and then host name S6. And we go to the interface fast ethernet 01, and then allow the trunk port. And after that, we can go to our PC IP configuration and then click the DHCP. And as we can see, the DHCP request is successful, and also we do the same for the other PC. And yes, the DHCP request is also successful. And now we're gonna proceed to the R3. Accessing it, to go to enable and then configure terminal and change the host name, which is R3. After that, we will also create a pool for the VLAN 7. Then we're gonna input the network address assigned to the VLAN 7, which is 10.136.3.32/28. In its default router, the first usable host, which is the 10.136.3.33. And since this activity has a router on a stick application also, we need to issue the command int g000.7 and issue the command encapsulation.1q7 for the VLAN 7. And we also do the same for the rest of the VLAN, which is the VLAN 17. After that, we will also create a pool for the VLAN 17, having its network address of 10.136.2.224 and its subnet mask /27. Then its default router, the first usable host, which is the 225. And after that, in int g000, we issue the no shutdown command. And as we can see, it is already up. And now for the switches, we configure it, change its name, and we go to the interface port connected to it and allow the trunk port and allow the VLANs to pass through it, the VLAN 7 and the VLAN 17. And since we already know that we have VLAN 7 and VLAN 17, we need to create that VLANs in these switches. Given in the screen are the commands. Name VLAN 17 and then we go to the interface to activate it. And now we're gonna do the same for the second switch. Hostname S2 and then the VLAN creation. And now we're gonna do the configuration of the port from the pieces to switches. And since here the connected port is F03, we need to make an access for VLAN 7 and this another PC for VLAN 17, which is the port F02. And after that, we will also gonna allow the trunk port for the ports between the two switches. After configuring the R1, we now proceed to R2 and we should enable and then configure terminal. And in this case, we almost do the same just like what we did on the previous router. We create a DHCP pool for each VLANs. And for each switch, we make sure that the ports are already configured and the switches, and we allow the mode trunks or the port trunks in order for the packets or the frames to pass through the switches. And as you can see, the DHCP request was successful for each PCs. And now for each router, we configure it and put an IP address for each connection. In this case, we have serial 010 and we input an IP address, and we will do it for each router and each ports connected to it. And now, since all the routers already have their corresponding IP addresses, we will now proceed to IP routing, or the static routing. And static routing is a manually configured route in a routing table. Unlike dynamic routing protocols, which automatically learn and adapt to network changes, static routes require a network administrator to explicitly define each route. And in this case, we will issue the command IP route 10.136.2.0 and its subnet mask. And since we were gonna came from R1 to R4, we will be having our next sub address, which is 10.136.3.58. And we will gonna issue all the IP route commands for all the network addresses that we were gonna go. In this case, the 10.136.2.128 and its subnet mask, and we will gonna pass through the same next sub address. And for the next part on router 4, we're gonna also configure it to send back the packets. So we're gonna issue the IP route again, and then to the network address that we were gonna send the 10.136.0.0 and its subnet mask /23. That is 255.255.254.0, and the next hub address, which will be the port connected to R1, the 10.136.3.57. And now we will gonna try if we can already send packets, and yes, it is successful.